This is a Sasyn mental performance where we build athletes who become incredible human beings. Talent might open the door, but leadership, accountability, and mindset determine how long you stay in the room. Today, I got a special guest from the city of Houston. Don Egdorf's here joining us. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. So Don's backstory, I've known Don ever since I moved to Texas here 21 years ago and got to be great friends with this man. The story is Don moved here when he was 7 years old, was a hockey fan right away. So as he gets older, he starts playing adult hockey, and go figure, he's a little bit mouthy. The fellow officials weren't too happy with it. They said, if you're so good at this, why don't you do it? So Don did. Took a class, figured it out. Next thing you know, he's in Florida visiting his grandma on a quick stay. Boom, he starts officiating the Sunshine Hockey League, a league which I played in. He goes from the Sunshine Hockey League to the International Hockey League. Big pro hockey now, follows into the East Coast Hockey League. What's he do for the summers? I think I'll do a little bit of roller hockey professional, the one where they go up the ramps. Don's in that. Go figure. So then he's like, all right, I got to get an adult job. Comes back to Houston, joins the police academy. So here's Don, cadet, goes through, rises up in the ranks, a career officer, ends up teaching over 4,000 students the principles of law. Not only that, but DWI. He works with them to teach how to take those dangerous individuals off the road. Then he takes it one step further, where he goes to the state legislature, talks about improvement for people's safety, no texting and driving, distracted driving, and then naturally still with what he brought into it, DWI training and task force work. So then Don has a great career. All of a sudden, yep, great, I'm done, goes to retire. Then what happens? The DA calls him, says, hey, Don, we want you to come back in. We need your help. So he becomes the chief prosecutor with the DA. So he is back in the saddle, back out there doing good for the city of Houston. Welcome to the show, Don Egdorf.
Thanks, Carl, man. That was pretty cool.
Hey, man, all heroes don't wear capes, and I've always respected you for what you've done in law enforcement. And by the way, he is the local association president of officiating and the South Texas USA Hockey supervisor. So Don loves giving back, and we love having Don around. So absolutely well worth that opening. Eventually, the role you play comes to an end, Don, but the mindset you built stays with you. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think part of it, obviously, it's who I am, right? Just like same thing for you. You know, you're Carl Sasyn, whether you're on the ice or, you know, you're on the podcast or whatever it is. So your attitude doesn't change, your mindset doesn't change. So I like to be challenged. I like to do new things. I like to take on, you know, battles, for lack of a better word, where I want that challenge to be able to do something that's tougher, something I never expected to do. I never, 25 years ago, never thought I was going to be a chief investigator. And now here I am a chief. I'm responsible for, basically the entire agency of police officers. And as a cadet going through the academy, you never think about that. You just want to graduate. When you graduate, you just think, man, I got to get through field training, and then after that, I want to make it home for my shift. I want to make it through a good career. I want to provide for my family. And each step along the way, it's, hey, I think I could do a little bit more, or I can do a little more. I can do a little more. So constantly looking for those kind of challenges. And that's what makes us who we are.
Excellent point. I would be severely neglectful if I didn't mention this one story. I think we were friends for maybe about 5 or 6 years. It was before I stopped drinking alcohol. I was still in the throes of my obsession of drinking. And Don, being a DWI task force instructor, invites me and my wife to his sanctioned drink-a-thon so we could figure out how we act as we're drunk, and that we could train his cadets on how to manage people who are under the influence, if they're under the influence. And I can tell you what, Don, I was under the influence that time.
Well, and that's the idea. That's what we needed for people to come out and do that. That's how we teach those cadets. Please tell me you still have that picture.
I will make sure that I find a way to post that picture on this podcast so you can see it. It is me in a full-out jelly bean suit. I look like Gumby walking down the hallway. Don about crapped his pants when he saw me coming.
Yep.
It was absolutely hilarious. I will make sure that that comes on to this show because it was hilarious.
Yeah, what a awesome memory that is.
So, Don, why don't you tell me a little bit about kind of, I gave a quick summation, but what really got you to
Mhm.
where you are today?
Yeah, that's I think in a lot of ways that can be a hard question to answer because everything in the last 58 years got me to where I am today, realistically. So all the choices you make, all the decisions that you have to come up with. When I got out of high school, I went in the military. And, I spent time in the Air Force with the Presidential Honor Guard. It's a huge honor for me looking back at it. Now, when you're there, you don't think it's that big a deal. Later in life, you realize how important that was to shape who you are and what you are, the adversity that you go through. I started getting more involved in hockey. And, like you said, I was the guy that would run my mouth. You're terrible. How can you call that? How can you do this? And literally it was and I've said this to people too, if you think it's so easy, you come out here and do it. So I was like, all right, I'm in. So I went and did it. And I went out and did an 8U game and it scared the crap out of me because I was like, I'm gonna ruin hockey for all these people because I'm so bad. But that's where those challenges come in. All right. Well, yeah, the first game I was terrible. I know I was. The first adult league game, I was terrible. But you work at it and you work at it, you work at it, you get better. Eventually I get up into pro hockey. Not a lot of people get to do that. Worked my way into different leagues and then boom, it's time to get a real job and come back to Houston, go into police academy. Kind of work my way up through there. And, initially it's kind of the same way. Hey, just let me get through the first couple days. Let me get through the first year, and then it's, what, I think I want to promote because if I promote, I can do a lot more as a supervisor than I can as a street officer. And that's just the reality of it. So I just start to work my way up, make contacts, know people in the legislature, know people, all the higher ups everywhere. And eventually it's time to retire. Right. So I'm like, I'm done. I remember we had the conversation and I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore. And then, we get a new district attorney and it's a guy that I had worked with for a number of years and brings me in and, I'm kind of back to square one. I'm starting over, basically a new career, a new line of work, still police work, but it's very different being in a courthouse. And again, it's the challenge of it. All right. That's the part that I really like. It's overcoming those hurdles that end up getting in your way. How do I figure this out? How do I get here? How do I get from here to all the way up here? Because this is where I want to be. And of course, when I get up here, the next step is how do I get way up here?
Right.
So there's always that challenge to it of wanting to be better.
No, that's excellent. And we've known each other a long time. Tons of respect for what you do and how you do it. So,
Mhm.
what is one belief that you hold about mindset and performance that you feel people may disagree with?
I've thought about this, and I don't know if people disagree with it necessarily. There may be some, but I think number one, you've got to believe in yourself above everybody else. I know what you do. I would jump off a bridge for you if I had to. But the reality is that if I can't make myself better, I can't help you. And part of that is that service mindset. You go in the military, we're not necessarily doing that just for yourself. You're doing that for others. You go into the police department, you go in there to help other people. Officiating. The reality is that people don't pay to see the referees.
Yeah.
They pay to see the players. So my job as an official is to take care of the players and to make sure they're in a situation that's going to be good for them. So I think maybe it's not having an attitude of being completely self-serving. I think it's an attitude of being able to use yourself to help others. And if you don't believe in yourself, you'll never get to that point. So maybe there's some disagreement with that, where people are always, I'm first no matter what. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like myself a lot, but I look at it like I'm going to be a better person for me if I'm able to help you.
No, that's perfect. Segues into the next question. What do you think most people exude when they first walk in a room? Do they look like they're confident or do they act for arrogancy?
I'm going to have to use one of the worst answers ever and say it depends.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that because typically your reputation will walk into the room before you do. So, for example, when I was a street officer and I was going to court to testify, they knew who I was before I walked into that courtroom. So the attorneys on both sides knew what they were getting when I came into that room. The judge had probably seen me before. So when the judge hears my name, he knows what to expect. They know what I'm going to say. They know what I'm going to talk about. They know that I have integrity. They know I'm going to tell the truth. There are others that don't put that off that way. They've had bad experience with people. So before that person ever walks into the room, they already know this guy's going to be a problem. He's got an attitude. He's going to give us a hard time. He's not going to answer. excuse me, is not going to answer questions, things like that. So you can walk into a room at a pure confident. You can also walk into a room and you're kind of a sheep and you've got your shoulders slumped over and people don't really pay attention to you. And I think that kind of goes both ways with some of that.
Oh, that's good. When was the last time that you really had your confidence shaken?
Man, Sunday. So today's what? Wednesday, right? So I don't think anybody is above ever having that happen. And I think the reality is it happens to us a lot more than we like to admit. So, I talked about like to be challenged, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I've taken on this year is doing triathlons. So my wife thinks I'm crazy for it. My family thinks I'm crazy for it. You're too old for this. I'm not a good swimmer and I hate running, but I had it in my head. I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm getting this done. I'm going to do a half Ironman later this year. So I had a race on Sunday and I jumped into the water and about 100 yards into the swim, I was like, holy crap, I'm not going to make it. And just kept having that thought. I've had people run into me. I get kicked in the face. Or when I jumped in the water, there's concrete underneath the dock and I scraped my ankle up on it. And I really wondered, man, am I going to make this? Am I going to get through this swim to be able to get out, to get onto my bike where I know I'll do well, just to get to the run where it's not going to be so well? So it's not always something life changing that your confidence is going to get shaken on. It's something that I'm like, hey, I want to do this, but there's a lot of days where I'm training or doing an event and I'm like, man, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. So, and it's all in my head. I know how to swim, but something happens, you get a little bit of adversity and it kind of throws you. So, I'm no better than anybody else when it comes to that.
What do you think when that feeling hit? I don't think I'm going to
Mhm.
make it. What made you take the next stroke? What made you to continue to swim? What was that motivation that got you through it?
I hate to say that it's that fear of failure, but it's more just not wanting to give up. It would have been simple to say, hey, you know what, I'm done, and have one of the kayaks come over and grab me and, pull me back into shore. But to me, it's more of I said, I'm going to do this. I want to do it. I'm going to force myself to do it. I'm going to get through, I'm going to get through running, even though my entire life I've done everything I could to avoid running. And, I go out and I sign up for this race and I've got a swim that I'm not great at and I've got a run that I'm not great at, but I'm going to finish it and I'm going to achieve my goal and I'm going to find a new one after that. So it'll be something different that I'm not very good at and I don't do very well, but I'm going to learn it and I'm going to challenge and I'm going to win.
Excellent. You've been around not only elite athletes, elite hockey players, elite officials, elite members of law enforcement. What's
Mhm.
one thing you could say is they have in common from your perspective?
I think it's just it's the desire to do well and not just do the bare minimum. It's that desire to want to be better than everybody else is. And it's not to say that, one person's achieved more than somebody else. If I'm doing 10U games, I want to be the best 10U official I can. If I'm doing ACHA, I want to be the best ACHA official that I can be. So it's not about me trying to be better than Carl. It's about me trying to be better than I thought I could be before.
What do you think one failure you could go back and look at that made you better?
Man, that's a long list. Probably taking a sergeant's test and failing it miserably. And it's because I didn't put the work into it. I had heard from people since I was a rookie officer, if you're going to take the test, you've got all these different materials you have to know, and you basically have to memorize thousands of pages is what it feels like. And I was like, I don't need to do that. So I don't need to take time off to study. I don't need to take the same approach that everybody else is taking because I know how to do my job. Well, I went and I bombed it. It was terrible. So I went and took it again a couple years later, and I didn't do as good as I needed to. So I didn't make the cutoff. Third time I did it, I was like, you know what? I'm putting the extra work in. I took the days off. I turned the phones off. I put 8+ hours a day into studying. And I ended up finishing it within the top 50. And I think 200-ish, 250 people end up promoting off of that. But it was important to me, not just to make the cutoff. I wanted to be way higher than what the cutoff was. And I did. I didn't do enough. I didn't push myself hard enough. I know I can do this, but you have to put the work in to make it happen. So, and that's one of the things that taught me.
No, that's good. When pressure's at its highest, whether it be with law enforcement or running your Ironman or officiating a hockey game, what do you
Mhm.
focus on? What do you gravitate towards when you feel that pressure?
I think part of it is trying to get myself to relax a little bit. It's real easy to get caught up in a moment, whether you're on the ice or at some kind of, crazy police scene or the middle of a race. But if you can force yourself to relax a little bit and calm down and calm your breathing down and not get caught up in the moment of what you're doing, If you're officiating a hockey game and you've got a couple thousand people in the stands and they're screaming at you about all the calls that you've missed the entire game, and then you let that get into your head, and then something else happens, you're like, holy crap, should I call that just to shut the crowd up, Or do you take that second and think for just a moment and catch your breath? You're like, there's nothing here. There's no call there.
I know myself personally, I spent a lot of time inside my head. If I was inside your head, what would one thing utterly shock me about what you go through on a daily process in your thoughts?
Wow. That's a tough question.
So it's what's in there, what's lurking.
I think deep down for anybody that wants to be a high achiever and wants to do well, I think there's a fear of failure and, a fear of not accomplishing the goals that you set out for yourself. With my job at the DA's office, I've got 115 people that are under me. If I have a crappy day or if I let it really sink in, that something's not great, well, I don't just let myself down. I let all those guys down, So I think that always kind of sits there. We have a meeting with the boss and it's about trying to get pay raises for all of our investigators. I go in, I have a bad day and I say something stupid. Well, now I just cost all 115 guys a whole bunch of money because I didn't get the pay raise that they all deserved and had wanted and had expected. So I think there's always a little bit of fear of that failure that's in there.
What advice do you believe people should stop following as far as mental performance?
I think there's so much out there that tells people to only focus on themselves. Take hockey, for example, right? Whether you're an official, you're a player, you have to work within a team. Law enforcement's the same way, right? Everything's about being a team. So if somebody's given a kid advice or somebody's given an official advice of ignore everybody else, just think about yourself. You're going to succeed if all you think about is yourself. Well, I think you're going to fail if you only think about yourself. If you and I go out and we work a game together and we're both wearing a bands and a 4-man and I'm not paying attention to what you're doing and how you're calling your game, I'm going to be completely off the deep end. You and I are going to be so far off. And the other two guys on the ice they're going to know it. The people in the crowd, they're going to know it. The players are going to know it. So they're going to know at one end of the ice, they're going to get away with whatever they want. And at the other end, everything's getting called. And we fail because we're not working together. You see it with the hockey parents out there. You watch the 12-year-old kids on the ice and you see that one dad that's going back and forth along the boards during practice, banging on the boards, screaming at his kid, don't pass that puck to him, you go shoot it. No, it's a team sport. Somebody's got to score, but somebody's got to get the assist too.
The good thing is we've officiated together several times and we all know the manslaughter charges or potential murder happening in my end, whereas Don's
That's right.
straight by the book, nailing it. And I'm just looking at, I don't know. That was a big thing we always talk about. Who's going to get involved first? And it's hands
That's
up,
right.
not me. So
you do a better job of staying away than I do sometimes.
So give me a good one story, whether it be in your law enforcement career or in your hockey career, like something that completely caught you off guard that happened. Because I know I go through games, I'm like, never seen that before. Like just something completely off the rails.
So I was doing, there's been a bunch. So here's a couple for you though, that really kind of threw me. So doing a roller hockey game in Florida, probably 12U, 14U, something like that. Call a penalty on a kid. It was probably his third or fourth penalty of the game. It's no body checking in that, at that level. And you got a kid that just wants to go out and hit everybody. So he keeps getting penalties for it. So we take him to the box. And just before he's getting in the box, I look over at the scorekeeper and I'm telling the scorekeeper what the penalty is. And the kid turns to me and he starts to open his mouth and say something. And instead of opening his mouth, I get a cross check straight to the chest. I'm just kind of sitting there. I'm like, what in the world just happened? And I'm like, I don't even know how to react to that. Your first thought is, well, I think I'm going to hit him back. But, it's a kid. He ends up getting tossed out. He gets some crazy suspension and everything else. And of course, then you're like, all right, well, it's happened now. It'll never happen again. Right. So that same summer, I'm doing Major League Roller Hockey. Orlando and Virginia are in the playoffs. And these are a bunch of Coast League guys and some IHL guys that are playing down there. There's a complete bench brawl at the end of the game. So the game ends, the horn goes off. We're out there on the rink. Everybody's going to shake hands, right? Oh, there's no handshake. There's like just fists flying everywhere. So, and you've been in these before on both sides, I'm sure. And as the officials, my partner and I are like, man, I don't even know where to go first. So my partner ends up getting pulled in by somebody, and there's a player that's literally pulling his referee sweater up over his head and just pounding him, giving him uppercuts. And I'm like, I can't even believe what I'm seeing here. So we're trying to get that guy taken care of. You go around towards the end of the rink and there's a big mess down there. Well, we get in the middle of that. Well, next thing I know, I'm getting punched in the face 4 times by a player. And the video, I wish I still had it, was kind of cool looking back at it, because you could see my helmet fly off my head and go, across everybody. So that player, 2 players out of that end up going to jail that night. One of them played for the Houston Aeros the following year when they won. So won everything. And it's like, I can't believe that guy gets suspended for all those games for this from the East Coast League. The Aeros call him up and he ends up getting a ring. So, luckily that doesn't happen to too many people. I guess I'm just that guy that it happened to.
Just lucky enough to have that occur throughout your career.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm that guy.
I'm that guy. I love it. So if we took away your job title, all your accomplishments, your resume, your reputation, who do we have? Who is Don Egdorf?
I would say I'm a guy that wants to do the best job that I can. I want to be the best dad that I can. I want to be the best husband that I can. And you don't need a job title or a platform to stand on to be able to do that. I think that's something that we each just have in ourselves. I want to make sure my wife is happy. I want to make sure she's taken care of. I want to be able to get her things that she wants. Same thing for the kids. And if everybody else is happy, then I know I'm going to be happy.
It's excellent. What's one mindset, being that mental health and mental wellness has really come to the forefront, not only for law enforcement, but athletes as well? What is one thing you wish someone would have taught you 20 years ago about your mindset?
Oh, man, that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and, look, we grew up in the 70s and 80s, right? So my dad was a police officer when I was growing up. And, that just back in those days and when I was a rookie officer, look, you don't talk about not feeling good. You don't talk about that being on a scene where 5 kids were killed is going to bother you, where you watch a guy, shoot somebody, you watch a person take their last breath. So we're human. This stuff bothers us. And and I'll never forget this. So as a rookie officer, I've been on probation for maybe a month and a half, and I make a traffic stop and a guy pulls a gun on me on the traffic stop out there by myself. So I do what I have to do. I get the gun taken away from him. I get him put in handcuffs. I get him in a police car. So I did not shoot him. Didn't even have time to pull my own gun out. And the officers that showed up to the scene afterward, because I got on the radio thinking I sound all cool and everything. And next thing you know, there's lights and sirens everywhere. I'm like, man, what are you guys doing here? Why'd you get here so quick? Or because you sounded panicked on the radio, and you don't realize it when you're going through it. But the number of people that told me, you should have shot that piece of crap. That was your opportunity for this. You could have done this. You could have done this. Well, I didn't need to. And frankly, I didn't want to. But those are some of the attitudes that you end up getting. Now, one of those same guys that told me that ended up being involved in a pursuit that ends up in a fatal crash. Innocent person ends up getting killed. And that guy's career ended because mentally he was that guy. Oh, you should kill him. You should do this. You should do this. Well, then he gets involved in an incident and he doesn't know how to react to it. And he ended up, cost him his career. And I wish back then we had some of the same opportunities for help that we have now, where we have peer support. We have programs that tell officers, hey, it's okay to not be okay with what's going on out here and with what you're seeing and what you hear and the things that you have to put up with. So, 25 years ago, it would have been nice to have those programs.
Wow. We've known each other over 20 years. You never told me that story. That was pretty powerful. So if we have a young athlete, a businessman, law enforcement, any individual struggling with confidence, pressure, mistakes, what advice would you give them to help them get through?
You got to talk to somebody. So whether it's talking to somebody like yourself that's, that has training to be able to help people, or talking to one of their partners, talking to a parent, talking to a coworker, it could be anything, but sometimes just having that conversation, hey, I'm not real comfortable doing this. I'm not comfortable doing this. Well, here, let me show you how I handle that situation. He may ask you the same question and you give him a different example of how to handle that same situation. But what it's doing, it's putting tools in the toolbox. So now when that comes up again, hey, you know what? I remember Don telling me this. Wait, I remember Carl telling me this. Hey, I remember Wilkie telling me this. And you can take either that whole piece from one person or a combination from all three, and you might get your solution for how to handle that situation.
That's a great point. Is there anything we may not have covered is there anything like that comes across your mind?
I think being open and honest with yourself sometimes is something that we don't always do. There's times, as much as I like to think sometimes I can do anything, the reality is there's some things I just can't do. And, even though, you're going to be working pro hockey well into your 70s, for me, I'm past it. There's days out there doing 14U and I'm like, oh my God, I can't keep up with these kids anymore. So I think, you have to be confident in yourself. You have to be confident in your abilities, but don't let yourself get so overconfident that you put yourself into a bad situation that you're going to fail. So I know if I try to go out and work the American League this year, man, I'm toast. So I'm probably going to end up getting knocked out. You're going to carry me off the rink in a stretcher. But I know better. I know I can't put myself in that situation because it's not only bad for me, it's bad for everybody else out there as well. I'm not in a position where I'm just want to take those chances, anymore. And sometimes the way you learn it is you go out and do it and you fail. And your failures are some of the best examples to teach you what you can and can't do.
Perfect. Great way to end the discussion. Don, thank you so much.
Absolutely, man. I'm glad we did this.
Assassin mental performance. Discipline today, dominate tomorrow. If this conversation helped you think differently about performance, share it with someone who may need to hear this. Follow Assassin Mental Performance. All my social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's all about helping the next generation of athletes. Remember, knowledge is power if you choose to apply it. Now go out and execute.